The battlefield fell silent for just a moment, then chaos erupted. What happened next was not a clash of equals, but a storm of steel, fire, and split-second decisions that would decide the fate of an entire front line. The battle began with a calculated Russian push from several directions, designed to overwhelm Ukraine's defensive lines. Tanks and armored vehicles led the assault, many fitted with newly installed wire mesh cages meant to stop incoming drones. This was not a random upgrade. These protective cages were a direct answer to the growing threat of Ukraine's FPV, first-person view, drones, which had already proven devastating in past encounters. As the armored columns advanced, they moved toward a forward village that was a key position for Ukraine's troops. Ukrainian forces did not wait to be overrun. Their artillery opened fire in precise, timed bursts, targeting the lead vehicles and forcing the rest of the Russian formation to slow down. The intention was not only to inflict early losses, but also to disrupt the speed and coordination of the attack. Ukraine bought precious minutes to ready its drone units by creating this pause. The artillery's impact was felt immediately. Vehicles shifted closer together for protection, unknowingly making themselves easier to target from above. The Russian choice of multi-directional assault was risky. While it allowed them to pressure several Ukrainian positions simultaneously, it also stretched their supply and communication lines thin. Each approach route faced its defensive challenges, with terrain and urban structures limiting the maneuverability of the heavier vehicles. In these moments, the wire cages on the tanks provided a slight advantage, as the slow pace gave Ukraine's defenders time to adapt and set traps. For Ukraine, the opening stage was about control of timing, of range, and psychological pressure. Every delayed Russian vehicle meant more opportunities for drone teams to position themselves for the kill. The sound of artillery shells landing was matched by the hum of FPV drones being armed and readied. Operators worked in underground shelters and concealed positions, watching live feeds that tracked Russian armor creeping closer. This first exchange showed that in modern warfare, speed alone cannot break a defense that combines traditional firepower with drone technology. The Russians had the numbers and heavy armor, but the Ukrainians had precision, preparation, and the ability to slow the fight to their preferred pace. By the time the artillery ceased fire, the battlefield was no longer an open road for the attackers. It had become a hunting ground for Ukraine's aerial weapons. Coming up, the pause in Russia's advance gave Ukraine the perfect window to unleash its FPV drones, and the results would be both destructive and costly for the attackers. Ukrainian FPV drone units moved in quickly once the artillery fire had slowed the Russian advance, turning the battlefield into a deadly contest of speed and precision. Operators locked onto the lead tanks, sending kamikaze drones racing toward their targets at low altitude to avoid detection. The first strike hit perfectly, turning off a heavily armored vehicle and blocking the path for others behind it. Moments later, another drone found its mark, destroying a second tank before it could maneuver out of danger. These rapid kills sent a clear signal. Russian armor was unsafe, no matter the protection. However, not every target fell so easily. Many Russian vehicles now carried dense steel cable nets wrapped tightly around their hulls, a new defense meant to break or deflect incoming drones. This adaptation forced Ukrainian operators to adjust their approach. Sometimes it took 3, 5, or even 10 drones to entirely destroy a single tank. Each hit chipped away at the defenses until a weak point appeared, and then a final strike would ignite fuel or ammunition. The cost difference still worked in Ukraine's favor. Even 10 FPV drones cost far less than one modern battle tank. The sheer persistence of Ukrainian drone crews became a deciding factor. When one drone was intercepted or damaged by countermeasures, another was already on the way. The coordination was tight. Each pilot knew their sequence in the attack chain, ensuring no wasted time between strikes. Russian anti-drone systems, including signal jammers, managed to stop some incoming threats, but many drones were pre-programmed with target coordinates, making them harder to disrupt. Visual footage from the strikes revealed just how brutal this method was. One tank, after surviving multiple hits, finally erupted in flames when a drone struck an exposed section near the engine compartment. The explosion was so violent that it scattered debris across the field, halting nearby vehicles out of fear of further attacks. This kind of destruction not only removed equipment from the fight and shook the morale of Russian crews, who knew their defenses were not foolproof. The Russian formation was already weakened by the time the first wave of FPV strikes ended. Several armored vehicles burned in place, others lay abandoned by their crews, and the remaining units were forced to move more cautiously. This hesitation directly played into Ukraine's hands, slowed the offensive further, and allowed for even more targeted ambushes. Coming up, with Russian armor stalled and morale under pressure, Ukraine prepared a series of deadly ambushes, waiting for the perfect moment to strike with maximum effect. Ukrainian drone teams proved that patience could be just as deadly as speed. In several sectors, they set up ambushes, holding fire until Russian vehicles entered the most vulnerable range. This tactic improved strike accuracy and conserved valuable drones for high-value targets. Operators carefully watched through their video feeds, waiting for the perfect opportunity. When a Russian armored vehicle rolled past with its crew unaware, the strike was immediate and devastating. One attack stood out for its precision. A tank had stopped with its hatch open, likely due to crew carelessness or a rushed dismount. An FPV drone darted through the gap and detonated inside, triggering an explosion far more destructive than an exterior hit. Internal blasts often ignite stored ammunition or fuel, tearing the vehicle apart from within. This method was highly effective and cost-efficient, usually requiring just a single drone to finish the job. The psychological effect of such strikes was significant. Crews that survived became more hesitant, slowing their advance and avoiding specific routes. This gave Ukrainian defenders more time to reposition or prepare follow-up ambushes. The element of surprise was a constant advantage. When attackers did not know exactly where the threat would come from, they were forced to act cautiously, losing the momentum needed for a successful push. Coordination between artillery spotters and drone pilots made these ambushes even more effective. In some cases, artillery was used to channel Russian vehicles toward pre-selected kill zones. Once inside these areas, FPV drones could be launched from short range, minimizing exposure to enemy jamming systems. The results were often swift. Multiple vehicles disabled in under 5 minutes, leaving the rest of the convoy vulnerable to further attacks. The efficiency of these tactics depended heavily on discipline. Drone operators resisted the urge to engage early, knowing that patience often led to cleaner kills and less wasted equipment. This discipline reflected a growing professionalism in Ukrainian drone warfare, where every shot counted and every ambush was part of a larger defensive plan. When Russian forces realized they were walking into traps, it was usually too late. Smoke from burning armor marked the kill zones, and retreating units often had to navigate through the wreckage of their vehicles. This constant cycle of ambush and destruction wore down both the attackers' physical strength and morale. Coming up, even as ambushes thinned their ranks, Russian forces brought in heavier weapons, forcing Ukraine to adapt quickly against new threats like mine-clearing vehicles and thermobaric rocket systems. Russian forces soon brought in heavier weapons to break through Ukrainian defenses. Mine-clearing vehicles like the UR-77 Meteorite moved to the front, using explosive charges to blast open safe lanes. These machines could clear large paths in seconds, allowing armored columns to advance without fear of hidden explosives. At the same time, thermobaric rocket systems such as the TOS-1 were deployed, capable of creating massive fireballs that could wipe out entrenched positions. However, Ukrainian reconnaissance spotted these threats early. Using a network of scouts, observation drones, and radio intercepts, defenders tracked the movement of both UR-77 units and TOS-1 launchers. When their positions were confirmed, Ukrainian forces quickly pulled frontline troops back to avoid heavy losses. This rapid withdrawal and flexible command meant that the robust Russian systems often found their targets empty by the time they struck. Once the danger had passed, Ukrainian counterattacks followed. FPV drones were sent after the mine-clearing vehicles, striking them before they could be reused. The UR-77, with its hefty explosive charges, became a high-priority target. In one instance, a drone dive-bombed directly into the launcher while it was still loaded, causing a secondary blast that obliterated the vehicle. The TOS-1 systems were equally dangerous but highly visible because of their large rocket pods. Ukrainian artillery and precision-guided munitions targeted these launchers whenever they were detected. A successful strike eliminated a significant threat and had a strong psychological effect on Russian troops, who relied on these weapons for shock attacks. The combination of early warning, rapid withdrawal, and swift counterstrikes showed how Ukraine adapted to counter superior firepower. Instead of absorbing the full impact, they used mobility and intelligence to make Russia's heavy weapons less effective. This approach conserved the workforce while still inflicting significant losses on enemy equipment. Each destroyed vehicle also cost Russia a lot of money. The UR-77 and TOS-1 are expensive, specialized machines that cannot be replaced quickly. Losing them in the middle of an offensive forced Russian commanders to slow operations and reconsider tactics. The absence of these weapons gave Ukrainian defenders more breathing room to reinforce positions and prepare new traps for advancing forces. Coming up, even as heavy weapons were neutralized, Russian armored units attempted high-risk breakthroughs, only to meet a wall of precision FPV drone strikes waiting to cut them down. Two Russian armored vehicles tried to force a breakthrough, hoping to punch a hole in the Ukrainian defensive line. These were heavily armed and moved at high speed, attempting to overwhelm the defenders before they could respond. For a moment, it looked like they might succeed, as their advance was supported by covering fire from nearby infantry. But Ukrainian FPV drone teams were already in position. Operating from hidden launch points, they tracked the armored vehicles as they approached the weakest section of the defense. Once the targets entered the optimal engagement zone, the first wave of drones was launched. The precision of these attacks was remarkable. Each drone homed in on vulnerable points such as engine compartments and turret joints. The first vehicle was turned off after 2 direct hits, its mobility destroyed. The second vehicle tried to maneuver away, but another group of drones quickly chased it. Within seconds, it too was immobilized. The crews abandoned their vehicles and fled toward the nearby forest. In these conditions, their chances of survival were slim. Without cover from armor, they were exposed to both small arms fire and further drone strikes. This failed breakthrough attempt highlighted a growing challenge for Russian forces. Traditional armored assaults, once a powerful tactic, are now highly vulnerable to low-cost, accurate FPV drones. Even with additional armor or anti-drone cages, these vehicles can be stopped before reaching their objectives. In this case, the entire operation collapsed in less than 10 minutes, with no gain in territory and significant equipment losses. From the Ukrainian perspective, this was a textbook example of layered defense. Instead of meeting the armor head-on, they allowed it to enter a trap zone where multiple units could strike from different angles. The combination of pre-planned kill zones and rapid target updates from reconnaissance drones made the attack almost impossible to escape. The destruction of 2 armored vehicles in such a short time weakened the immediate offensive and had a psychological impact. Russian crews became more cautious in later operations, slowing their advances and giving Ukraine more time to reinforce positions. For commanders on the ground, it proved that the cost of losing a vehicle far outweighs the potential benefit of a rushed breakthrough. Coming up, Ukraine's drone operators would soon shift focus to deep strikes, targeting Russian ammunition depots, hidden armor, and supply points far behind the front lines. This next phase would put even greater pressure on enemy logistics. Ukrainian forces expanded their drone campaign by striking Russian supply lines and ammunition storage areas hidden deep behind the front. These targets were often well camouflaged, using forest cover or abandoned buildings to avoid satellite detection. However, reconnaissance drones with advanced cameras and thermal imaging made it possible to spot the heat signatures of engines or the movement of supply crews. Once identified, fiber optic drones were launched to maintain a secure connection, avoiding Russian jamming attempts. One successful strike occurred against a concealed ammunition depot in a dense wooded area. The attack began with a pinpoint hit on a fuel truck parked nearby, triggering secondary explosions that spread to stored munitions. Witnesses reported a series of loud blasts lasting several minutes, suggesting that thousands of artillery shells and rockets were destroyed in the fire. The loss reduced the enemy's firepower and forced them to relocate remaining stockpiles farther from the battlefield, increasing resupply times. In another case, Ukrainian drones located a tank hidden under camouflage netting near a tree line. The vehicle was positioned for a future assault, but a precision strike annihilated it before it could be moved. The explosion scattered debris across the area, making recovery impossible. These quick and targeted operations meant Russian armor could no longer remain idle without risk of sudden destruction. Perhaps the most unusual incident came when a bomb from a previous air attack failed to detonate and landed near Russian trenches. Believing it could be repurposed, Russian troops attempted to drag it back to a fortified position. Unaware of the danger, they brought it close to their defensive structures, only to explode unexpectedly. The blast wiped out the surrounding fortifications and caused significant casualties. While this was not a planned Ukrainian strike, it demonstrated the risks of handling unexploded ordnance in a high-intensity battlefield. These deep strikes severely disrupted Russian operations. Every destroyed depot or transport hub reduced the ability to sustain long-range artillery fire, and every lost vehicle weakened the offensive's momentum. For Ukrainian commanders, the combination of intelligence gathering, secure communication links, and precision drone attacks created a cost-effective way to degrade the enemy without committing large ground forces. Coming up, after crippling supply routes and storage sites, Ukrainian FPV teams would turn their attention to a new class of targets: light transport vehicles and even civilian-looking trucks carrying military cargo, proving that no part of the enemy's logistics was safe. Ukrainian FPV units began targeting transport vehicles that were critical in keeping Russian forces supplied. Unlike tanks or heavy artillery, these vehicles were often unarmored and easier to destroy, yet their loss could halt the delivery of ammunition, food, or equipment to frontline units. The logic was simple. Without steady resupply, even the most heavily armed positions would weaken. Trucks became priority targets, especially those suspected of carrying ammunition. In one operation, a Kamaz military truck loaded with artillery shells was detected moving along a rural road. Ukrainian artillery, guided by drone surveillance, opened fire from over 13 kilometers away. The first shell struck the rear section, igniting the cargo and causing a massive explosion that sent flames and debris hundreds of feet into the air. The blast was so powerful that it destroyed nearby vehicles and left a crater in the road, making it impassable for hours. Not all targets were military in appearance. Russian forces increasingly used civilian-looking vehicles, including vans and small trucks, to move supplies under the cover of regular traffic. Ukrainian drone operators adapted by improving reconnaissance methods, looking for subtle signs such as unusual weight distribution, heavy suspension load, or armed escorts. Once confirmed, these vehicles were struck with low-cost FPV drones, creating a significant economic imbalance, destroying a high-value cargo with equipment costing only a fraction of its worth. The strikes were not only about destroying hardware, but also about creating psychological pressure. Supply drivers knew they were exposed at any moment, which slowed deliveries and forced Russian logistics to take longer, more dangerous routes. Some convoys began traveling only at night, reducing their daily transport capacity and increasing strain on the system. Economically, the advantage was clear. A single FPV drone costing a few $100s could eliminate a truck worth tens of thousands, along with its ammunition or equipment. This cost-effectiveness meant Ukrainian forces could sustain such attacks for an extended period without exhausting resources. Over time, the cumulative losses forced the Russian side to commit more troops to guard supply convoys, pulling workforce away from other tasks. Coming up, the focus would soon shift to a new, dangerous innovation: static FPV ambush drones that waited motionless like hidden mines until an unsuspecting target entered their kill zone. Both Russian and Ukrainian forces have begun using a dangerous new tactic: static FPV drones left in place like hidden landmines. Instead of being flown directly toward a target, these drones are positioned in likely travel routes, powered on, and left waiting until an unsuspecting vehicle or soldier enters range. Once activated, they launch instantly, giving the target almost no time to react. This method combines traditional mine stealth with modern drones' precision and mobility. The appeal of this tactic lies in its low cost and high impact. A static FPV can sit concealed under foliage, behind debris, or near narrow passages for hours or even days. Operators can monitor their camera feed remotely, waiting for the perfect target. Because these drones don't need to be flown long distances, their batteries last longer, and their attack speed is faster, reducing the chance of interception. This has made them particularly effective in ambushes against vehicles carrying supplies or troops moving between positions. One recent incident showed just how dangerous these drones can be. A Ukrainian driver transporting equipment along a dirt road noticed an object hidden near a bend. From experience, he recognized the shape as an armed FPV waiting to launch. Acting quickly, he stopped his vehicle and used small arms fire to destroy it before it could activate. If he had continued forward, the drone's warhead could have destroyed the truck and killed everyone inside. The psychological effect of static FPVs is also significant. Drivers and infantry must constantly be on guard, scanning the skies and the ground ahead. This slows movement, disrupts supply schedules, and increases stress on personnel. For Russia, it has become a way to guard choke points or create kill zones without stationing large numbers of troops. For Ukraine, it offers a tool to deny Russian movement along certain roads without continuous drone flights. Strategically, this approach forces both sides to adapt. Vehicles now often travel with led scout teams, and engineers are tasked with checking routes for hidden drones before convoys pass through. However, these precautions take time and resources, which limit the pace of operations. Coming up, with FPV warfare becoming more innovative, the battlefield is no longer defined only by tanks and artillery. It's now a contest of creativity, where low-cost technology can outsmart and outmatch far more expensive systems. In summary, the rise of static FPV drones marks a turning point in modern warfare, where small, inexpensive devices can threaten even the most heavily protected vehicles. By blending the patience of a mine with the precision of a guided weapon, both Russia and Ukraine have found ways to stretch their resources and disrupt enemy movements. The tactic's success lies in the damage it causes and the constant fear it creates, slowing advances and forcing costly countermeasures. As this innovation spreads, the front lines will continue to evolve, proving that ingenuity can be just as decisive as firepower in today's conflict. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support drives us to keep creating more high-quality and in-depth content. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned for our next video. See you soon.